Good afternoon, capital traders, and hello, YouTube. This is Frank coming to you with the market recap for Thursday, September 27th. A little bit of a mixed day in the market. It was almost a tale of 2 days. First half of the market, quite a bit of buying. Second half of the market, quite a bit of selling. Didn't really go anywhere. Closed up a little bit on the day, but really was one of those back and forth days. As we look at the S&P 500, nothing really to see here. We started to try to get that movement, but just really couldn't quite carry over that momentum, closing relatively close to the bottom of the day's candle. We haven't broke anything from a technical point of view or anything like that, so we're doing just fine over there. Nasdaq was able to break through once again. Of course, he tried yesterday for giving back those profits before the day was through. Got pretty much gapped open here today, was able to hold the break. Sold a little bit off of its highs, but it was definitely our strongest performing index here today. Not too far away from that all-time high either, but I think it was nice for the bulls at least to see us get a break and close above that little resistance level that was causing us some problems these last few weeks. Over in the Dow, much like the S&P, kind of started off going strong, sold off, closing the day relatively flat. We still are in that pullback phase. Certainly no trigger candles, from a broad market point of view here today over in the Dow Jones. But our trend still looks just fine. It's nice to see some nice bounce back, after yesterday's late day selling. Speaking of selling, over in the Russell, of course, we broke that major support level at 1700 yesterday and really just kind of hung around today. Didn't test it, just kind of closed right about the bottom of yesterday's candle. Not a great show of weakness. Overall, the market was up today, and Russell just understandably so. Who wants to buy it on a day like that, right? You may not want to sell it the day after it breaks a major support level, but you probably don't want to buy it. At least I know I don't. So we'll continue to monitor that over in the Russell, but that is where we find ourselves over in our overall indexes here today. As we move into the sectors, materials does continue to really struggle, breaking through support. Yesterday it kind of closed right above support. Today broke through and closed below support. Our next real level of support is about 57.50, give or take. So there is some downward movement to run. We are pretty extended to the downside, giving it all back and then some. It's the world of materials, right? It's been a lot of back and forth. I thought at least maybe we were done with that last week, but clearly I was not right. So moving into energy, pretty sideways days over there as we continue to hold the breakout point, but no real momentum coming back in to the sector just yet. Technically, we are unchanged from where we were yesterday. Financials, much like the materials, did break through support, closing below support. Pretty bearish signal overall from the financials. Interesting stuff going on in the financials right now. Some stocks are looking, like they might be in some interesting pullback situations. Others are looking pretty rough. So I guess it depends on that. If you really want to try to, pick within the sector when the time comes, and it's okay if you do, but it's also okay if you'd rather go look at things like healthcare and tech and things like that are showing better strength. But right now, closing below support, certainly not a good look. Definitely have to interpret that as a bearish signal. Again, we're pretty extended. We'll have to see how these develop over the next couple of days. At least that's what I'm going to be looking for. Pretty extended to the downside. I was initially watching for a pullback. That went a little deeper than I think it should have for a pullback. So I'm going to put you on the wait and see unless I see some strong upward movement develop. If there are some strong charts, some strong breakouts or something like that, over in the financial sector, I may be open to those things, but I'm not going to force the issue while we're breaking support and showing that sign of weakness. Moving into our staples, really continuing to do that little back and forth, overall drifting a little more towards the downside as we kind of failed that 50-day moving average. We're now 3 days closed below it. However it happened, it has happened. So we still have a little ways to go before our previous swing low, which lines up pretty nicely with the 200-day moving average. That's what I will be watching for personally as the next level of support over in the staples. Utilities had a little bit of a bounce back. I don't think any of us are terribly surprised that there was some some sellers leaving and maybe some buyers coming in today. We were very extended to the downside. We closed right above that 200-day moving average. Certainly an appealing price to close out of some bearish trades yesterday. This wasn't me, but as a buyer, I understand why folks were looking to buy off of the 200-day moving average. That makes sense. So I'm going to be watching that for retracement, but certainly at this point in time, buyers are at least stopping the bleeding in the short term off of that 200-day moving average. We remain strong over in healthcare, definitely one of our stronger performers here today, along with tech, continuing to push upward. So nothing really new to see here, just another day for the healthcare sector. Very, very close to testing a breakout on our discretionary, closing very, very close to the top of the trading range. So we can kind of watch that for a potential break. Of course, we've been really struggling at the top of this range, so it also might cause us some problems. So we'll have to wait and see. Personally, like I said before, a break would be intriguing to me. Till we see that, I'm really treating it as if it's going to be in a little bit of a sideways pattern. Looking over at real estate, had a little bit of a rally. Not as nice as the utility rally. Sold off off of its highs and did kind of close back down around yesterday's low, below that old resistance, old support that we kind of looked at yesterday. Still, much like utility, to me, these are still bearish charts. I'm not interested from a bullish point of view at this point in time through breaking of support, failing at resistance, just not showing a lot of strength. Certainly wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of a bearish retracement happen. I would expect that to happen in the relatively near future. Can't free fall forever, but hasn't done anything to sell me that we should be bullish just yet. Over in our communication services, we had a break today. We ended up closing above the 50-day moving average. We finally have enough information on this chart to know where that is. That was very strong early, but much like the overall market, gave back a lot of the gains as the day progressed. But still positive development overall, I think, within the sector, breaking through some resistance yet again, closing above the 50. We don't have a ton of history on these guys, but certainly we saw some bullish momentum, no doubt about that today, especially early. Moving into our metals, I think you could argue that that we did break down a little bit on gold today, currently 1187. I know a lot of people had support at 1190, but it probably depends on your personal rules. But certainly, however you want to spin it, getting closer and closer to failing the bottom of the trading range. Really, resistance is hard to break, right? It keeps trying, and it might try again, but it keeps trying and keeps getting knocked back down, and that is life of a downward trending stock that's making lower highs and lower lows constantly. Over in the silver market, we've kind of given back all of that little break that they had the other day over on Monday, kind of closed back down within this trading range. Now we know we have a little bit of resistance. I still will treat silver the same way. If it breaks that resistance, maybe it could get me a little more excited, although then the 50-day moving average is just sitting on top of it waiting to fight it. But for me, silver is a pass. I didn't like the break initially. I don't trust silver right now, and at least for a couple of days I'm feeling good about that decision. Maybe a week from now I won't be, but right now we have seen some resistance form. We have seen some downward movement. So we do still have the same bearish characteristics going on over in silver right now. Did have a strong day in the dollar, though, as it came flying back through that old resistance or old support level and really closed just below the 50-day moving average. Can't really argue with the strength of that bullish candle. There's no really way around that. I'm still going to be watching it as that 95.50 area as resistance. It still hasn't done enough to get me on board as a buyer. But, maybe it's a little closer to making sure I stay neutral. Today definitely made me want to stay neutral. I've been neutral. I continue to be. This day just reinforced I'm glad right now I'm neutral. But a very bullish candle, very bullish activity on the dollar today, regardless of my own personal stance. That's for sure. Natural gas continues to fight at resistance, going back and forth, back and forth. Again, it's easier to see this one as we look at a weekly chart. Just give that perspective. Going back and forth, you'll see it sell off, you'll see it run back up. We continue to hold that 3, which to me at least is psychologically important. So overall, we're looking like we only one more day, on that weekly chart, one more day, and we can say we closed above resistance. So we'll see how it develops here Friday. But continuing to fight at resistance, as we would expect. It's been very strong, and we can clearly see that. But again, resistance is hard to break. right? There's no two ways about that. And lastly, over in the crude market, pretty flat day. Dipped a little, rose a little, closed pretty flat, held its own though, so certainly technically looking pretty good over there. You think you could argue that we're dealing with a little bit of intraday resistance, which is always helpful if we go and look at a shorter time frame in the form of approximately 72.50. You can kind of see that's a little bit of a topping out point. I do think if we were to break that, we could look at that as a little breakout. Personally, I think that at least. I'm not saying we will break it, because it's hard to break resistance, but I do think we could look at that as a potential breakout point as we try to work further up into that 74 range where there really isn't a whole lot of resistance. But we do know we kind of have this little swing from back in the day causing us lining up with about where we are. So I do think if we can clear that, I do think 74 is likely. That is certainly we can't take that for granted, right? It's hard to break resistance, as I say many times, and we'll continue to say. But did hold its own today. We are continuing to remain overall pretty bullish over in that sector. Buyers are definitely willing to step in off of these little sell-offs, which is always good to see, at least if you are a bull. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where we find ourselves here on September 27th. Kind of a weird day in the market. You know, I don't really mind days like this. I don't really love days like this. We are seeing some interesting things develop, especially over in the industrial sector. There's a lot of pullback opportunities over there. And I think we missed somehow. I think I just looked at industrial sector so much today, we forgot to look at the industrial sector ETF when we were going through. I'm glad I thought about that before I let you guys get out of here. Industrial sector, I looked at this all day long. How the heck did I forget it? Oh well. Very nice little pullback situation going on in the industrial sector right now. You're seeing it trickle down into stocks within that sector. There's the guys in the halftime report went through and looked at about 15 interesting trade setups. And I've been seeing about the same thing as I've been going through the stock. So very interesting stuff on the pullback over in that sector right now. Almost seemed like I wanted to get going today, but I'm glad it did. You know, I really am. I wouldn't mind, it's taking another day or two. But if you're interested in that pullback, definitely take some time. Go check out some scans, because there definitely are some interesting looking bullish setups going on in the industrial sector right now, at least in my personal opinion. Now with that, ladies and gentlemen, that will do the market recap today. But as always, it is certainly my pleasure, and I do appreciate everybody's time. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit that notification bell so you can be alerted to any new videos that we're uploading over here. And be sure to follow us over at Tackle Trading on Twitter, keeping up with some of the things that we're doing over there, some of the things that we're watching out for on a daily basis. If you enjoyed the market recap, it's always helpful and appreciated if you do give it a thumbs up to let us know that we're on the right track. With that, ladies and gentlemen, get out of here. Happy trading, and I will see you in the next one.